and so no names here. So and the statement was made by the senator that if I have to choose between the moon and the utilization of space station to the maximization, I choose station. And I will tell you that that's an easy sell politically. I can sell that to a lot of members a lot faster than I can sell the moon. Now, we want to go to the moon. We want constellation. Our bill makes that clear. We support that. But if we don't go out and change the paradigm on the financial side, we're going to have to make that choice. There is simply no way humanly possible to fit the moon and utilization of the space station in the same budget that we're looking at right now. And I don't mean space station utilization just for exploration-related research. I mean utilization of the space station for what it was designed and intended to be used for, and that's broad-based research. And that's where the market is, in my view, in the short term for commercial development. That's your market. And for us to even think that we're going to limit that market by 2015 is insanity. And then at the same time ask people like you all to go out and invest and develop systems that would be useful. Just becoming useful and fully proven and adequate at that point in time is insane. So if we don't extend station, then to me that ruins the business case for the commercial plans, and we're undermining our own best alternative to a government-funded program. So those are just some of the few odds and ends I'd like to mention, and I'll just shut up and take questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, what I'd like to do now is we have a mic set up for questions from the audience, and since this is being recorded, they've asked that we try to use the mic. I don't know if we have a runner. Maybe it might be easier to get it around. Mike Gold, do you want to be the runner? And since I posed my questions at the beginning, and Chan, you had asked a little more clarification on one of those, but present company excluded, there seems to be a notion out there that COTS somehow is taking money away from Constellation program. So I guess that was really the root of that question. If you guys have a few thoughts on that, whoever wants to take a stab.
Sure. Yeah, I think in a tough budgetary environment, in the way that the account is structured, with COTS being in the same account as Constellation, all under exploration, it's I could see how somebody can make that assumption that if it's a small pie, it's zero sum. If you got money going for COTS, you're taking it away from Constellation, which may be the priorities for certain members, and I know that's the case for some certain folks. But I would argue that the two are very different. We need to keep that in mind, and maybe that is where the communication gap that you're alluding to is the fact that we're comparing apples and oranges when we talk about capabilities. Constellation is designed to be a lunar capability, whereas COTS, I don't think anybody has any plans to try to get to the moon. I mean, we're not delivering cargo there, we're not delivering crew there. So it's important to kind of make sure that we maintain that distinction between these two capabilities. And we need both of them. We're looking for both. We're not looking for just one or the other. And that's why there needs to be funding for both.
Mike,
Ken.
I was just going to say that when you talked about the communication gap, what I went to immediately was Norm Augustine's remarks yesterday at the press conference when he said, I didn't realize the commercial guys were that far along. I need to do my homework. And so the communication gap, to me, was helping them get the word out. And this is something we all can do, those of us who are familiar with what's going on in the commercial world, to get the word out so that everybody else finds out about it. One of the groups that I'm working with, the AIAA Commercial Space Group, our goal is to reach AIAA members, because their awareness of anything commercial in space, from telecom to remote sensing to PNT to launch vehicles to anything is fairly low. So we're trying to think of ways to elevate the level of awareness, and it was just typified by the statement yesterday by Norm Augustine, who's running our human spaceflight panel. So it's like that's a communication gap that I thought you were alluding to, or at least that's what.
Well, I think there's lots of gaps.
Yeah,
We like to talk
there are.
about gaps in space, so. Let's take a question from the audience.
I feel like Phil Donahue.
You don't look like
Don't
him.
have the hair yet.
Gary Barnhart, actually the chairman of the Executive Committee for the National Space Society. Chen made an interesting remark which seriously concerns me, the notion that COTS is just about low Earth orbit. In terms of the particular procurement exercises, sure, okay, but the reality of the situation is from last year, there are 2 very successful workshops on lunar communications and navigation opportunities. The notion of a fused architecture that could support both power, communications, and navigation for cislunar space as a COTS opportunity. There are tremendous angles out there. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Please don't shut it down before you even have the story.
If I may respond, I mean, yes, absolutely. I think, COTS as a model can definitely allow for all that. As I mentioned, COTS is just a really good deal for the government in terms of, trying to achieve a technology demonstration. But I was referring primarily to the, to 2 existing, COTS awardees, and they're funded to provide essentially low Earth orbit capability.
And Mike,
Let's give someone else a shot here.
Hi, Mike Lounge, the Boeing Company. I want to talk about a barrier to selling commercial services to NASA. I've had some experience at that. So imagine you finally got your project sold to NASA. They put together a plan and a contract opportunity that buys enough stuff for you to justify the investment. And you go to your investors, whether they're venture capitalists or banks with project finance or internal treasury, and when you're bringing NASA along as your anchor customer, NASA's not a very attractive customer. And there are 2 problems, and I'm wondering, this is really for Jeff or Chen, if there's any thinking on addressing these. One is the lack of multi-year appropriations, the lack of the ability to firmly commit to amount of funding that requires more than 1 year, and the other is termination liability, so that the offerer is at least made whole upon termination for convenience by the government. Those are fundamental showstoppers.
In terms of, your first suggestion in terms of a multi-year appropriations, frankly, just to be perfectly honest, I see that as a very extremely difficult, if not impossible prospect, not from necessarily, where we sit as authorizers, but just what I know about appropriators. That's virtually a non-starter. I just don't really see how that's going to, I'm not even sure how they're even willing to entertain, that conversation. So that's going to be a very difficult, path to pursue.
Well, the other thing is, it's, no Congress can bind a future Congress, that's a sort of a cardinal rule. But the issue that I mentioned earlier about this budget-driven policy, I think is relevant to that. If we have a consensus on policy that drives, and there's a consensus on that, then there's continuity. And the proof is that last picture that Frank showed of the space station. We went through 22 different votes to try to kill that in the Congress. It survived, and because there was a consensus built about what we were trying to do there. And that proves that you can have multi-year funding consistency. Now, did it take us 5 to 10 extra years, even without Columbia, to get it built because of lack of adequate funding? Yes. And so we increased our total cost. But I don't know that there is an answer to the systematic problem you're raising. We certainly, if you've got some language that you want to put in the bill, we'd look at it, but we have a hard time getting the House to agree to anything more than a 2-year authorization bill, let alone, and we always start with 3, at least, every time we have the last 5 years. So it's